This video is a sequel to the previous video I did about God, and the previous video was about what I believe I know about God and what I think you can know too. And this is speculation about God. Now, I think it's not just crazy, meaningless speculation because, for one, it's a cool idea, and two, it seems to me to be a meaningful idea, and three, I can't prove that it's true, but it is at least consistent with what I think I know about the material and logical aspects of reality. So what is the first thing? Oh yes, and I don't really believe that knowing God is really a yes-no question. It's more of a process. So I wouldn't be surprised if the day after I posted this video, if I thought of something slightly different than what I say here, or if I refine my ideas somewhat. This is just what makes sense to me right now. So my basic idea of a God that I think might exist and that I like to live as if it's true is there's a divide in existence, and on one side of the divide is the necessary premise, that which can prove everything else but is itself not proved. If you have that thing, you are God, and if you don't have it, then you're on the other side of the divide and you are not God, and your existence is contingent upon God. And without having the necessary premise, there's no way to get to it. So all of our understanding is necessarily limited, imperfect, incomplete, because we are not by nature God. And we have the experience that every material thing appears to obey mathematical laws. So it seems natural to think that math is somehow connected to the nature of God. And yet there are an infinite number of mathematical models which are internally consistent, but which have no known application to any material thing. That makes me imagine that maybe God in himself is an abstract, infinite potential, and that he created the material world as a tangible reflection of the infinity of potential within himself. And from this view, it would be entirely natural to guess that the universe would be very old and very big, because it's supposed to be a reflection of an infinity of potential. Maybe there's even multiverses. Also, if God is wholly contained within himself, then a universe which can spontaneously become more like God with time might be a better reflection of God than a universe that can't do that. And in that case, you would predict a universe that can evolve. That could be cosmological evolution, cultural evolution, biological evolution. There could be many evolutionary processes that take place in the universe. And maybe God is happy with them because they are pointing toward him, and they'll never get to them, but they point toward him, and that is as close as you can get in a finite representation to the infinite God. And what else did I want to say? And in this view of things, it's natural to think that since God created everything somehow by an act of will that you exist because God wants you to exist. And if logic and reason is God, or in some way is related to an aspect of God, then it makes sense to think that whenever you think of something that is true, you are contemplating the divine essence in an incomplete and imperfect way. So literally thinking depends on God in this conception of God. Now, how would you worship or serve this kind of God? Well, he created everything, and that's what we interact with most often is his creation. So it would seem that appreciating and trying to truthfully understand his creation is an act of worship. He is logic himself in a sense, so being internally consistent would also be important. And trying to become more like him, or to make stuff that's more like him, would also seem to be a good way of serving God. if the universe exists as a reflection of God, then trying in your own behavior to become more like God is what you're made for. And I would imagine you can do that. If God is a person and he behaves internally consistently and is self-contained, then trying yourself to become a better person, to like be virtuous, to understand better, to basically develop, that's a way of serving God. Raising a healthy family, making more people like yourself would be a way of serving God. Serving a community would be a way of serving God. Or maybe even if you can come up with an AI that is self-aware, maybe that would be a way of serving God by making something more like God than you can be. That would be pretty cool, although we don't really know if we can actually do that yet. And here's some other thoughts I had about it. At first, when I heard that when God was in the burning bush talking to Moses, when he said, "I am that I am," at first I thought that he was just being sassy. But I did have the idea sometime later that maybe the image of him being a burning bush that burns without consuming, and him saying, "I am that I am," that's a way of saying, I exist by my own power and for my own sake. I am a fire that burns without consuming because I am my own source. In that case, if you're supposed to be like God, that doesn't mean it's a static state of existence. Well, maybe God's nature is the same, but a fire is dynamic. So you can imagine that if you are perfect, perfection for you would mean getting better every day and doing things every day that you hadn't thought of doing the day before. And that seems like a cool idea. And trying as much as you can to have an internal fire that drives you so that you don't need stuff on the outside to make you who you are. And another thought I heard someone else say that for ancient people, giving something a name was like giving it its purpose and describing that thing. And God in the garden let Adam name the plants and animals. So it's as if God was actually letting human beings decide for themselves what's important and what's not. So that seems to me to mean, if that interpretation is correct, and this is also consistent with everything else I've said, that actually it is your right, to a certain extent, to decide things that are good and bad by yourself. Now, I think there are limits to this. If you decide to love something in a way that's unfactual, then you'll hate real life, and you'll have a distorted view of reality because you'll think of a fantasy that makes you happy rather than how things really are. And if you love things in a way that's internally inconsistent, then you'll be at war with yourself. But so far as I can tell, if you don't do those two things, then there's really no harm in valuing things however you want. Like, for instance, in your free time, it seems equally valid to me to play piano and to read a book. You can choose by yourself what's meaningful to you, and so long as there's no contradiction inherent in what you're doing, there's nothing wrong with it. You can convince yourself maybe that your life is meaningful, and if nothing in the real world contradicts your way of thinking about that, and if you really believe it, then it'll be true, at least to you. I'm looking at a list of things I wanted to write. Oh, the next thing is what it looks like when you disobey God with this conception of God. Well, God created everything, so you literally cannot do anything that he doesn't let you do. And I also like to think that the logic which causes a fool to destroy himself also comes from God. There is a proof in mathematics called proof by contradiction, where you don't directly prove that something is true, but you prove that it can't be false, otherwise it wouldn't make any sense. There'd be a contradiction. I like to think that when foolishness happens, then the people doing the foolishness are a particular manifestation of proof by contradiction of God's glory. So I like to think that God does want you to be more like him, but if you decide to do foolish stuff instead that he doesn't like, he doesn't really like it, but it doesn't really hurt him anyway because your bad example proves that he's good and glorious and you're being dumb. Which means really that trying to rebel against God is futile in the extreme. I think that might be everything I wanted to say. So this video, just to reiterate, is my speculation about what the nature of God might be like, but I can't really prove that it is true. But it seems cool and meaningful to me, so I like to act as if it is true, even though I can't really know.